All right, so we'll wait. We'll wait for Lola to come in. But in the meantime, I want to talk through a little bit about what we're doing today. And today is a little bit of a doozy because there's a lot of stuff to do. There's a lot of ground I want to cover, and we're doing kind of a hybrid. This used to be in two separate pieces, but I've found that we can combine these together and get a little bit more time later on for some of the work that you're going to be doing on your final. So it gives us an extra day by combining these together. But that being said, there's a lot to go over today and a lot to talk about. What we're going to start working with is we're moving away from the terrain, and we're moving into kind of a city, and we're going to be designing a skyscraper or a tower of some kind that's going to go in that city. So we're going to work on kind of large scale form. So we'll look from the big picture down. We'll create the form of the twisting form of the skyscraper. Then we'll slice it up, and we'll put the floors and the ceilings in, and we'll put a loft or a skin on it, etc. That then will get inserted into the city of San Francisco. I have a file for you guys to download. It's down here a little bit under part 4. It's a little bit old. It was something that was created by some grad students at Berkeley, where they created a mesh. You guys have all worked with mesh in the last terrain section. They created a mesh file that is essentially the city of San Francisco, and we can insert our building into this file. I have a site already prepared for you. You can drop it right in there. It's not fully accurate. It doesn't have like the Salesforce Tower, for example, but it's good enough to give us some good background context for our renderings, which is the ultimate goal today. After we get your building that we create into the San Francisco, we then need to set up our preliminary sun and sky system. So we'll be working a little bit in V-Ray. So this is kind of a combination of Rhino and V-Ray being put together. We'll get a little bit of a camera setup, and we'll do a rendering. This is not going to be a sky that has full clouds and whatever. It's not photorealistic. It's kind of like the sky that I gave you as a sample file. So we're just kind of getting the ball rolling here. Next class, so on Monday, we'll spend time talking about how do you create what's called an HDRI and drop in an image into the background that has clouds and give us a realistic sky and that sort of thing. So we'll go through that. And then on Wednesday, we will take our buildings and we'll talk about how do you either unroll them and prepare them for laser cutting, or create a file that I could then take to the 3D printer and actually print the building and a physical model of the building. I should also tell you guys that as far as I know, at least tentatively it's scheduled, that day we will have Daniel Abbott will be coming to kind of do a review of the class and make sure that things are going the way they're supposed to. I have to be evaluated once every couple years, so you guys get to be the lucky students who get to complete that, Lauren. Thank you guys for your patience and your honesty when we get to that point, but I'm giving you that warning. That's next Wednesday, and then you get spring break. Yay! So that's good. So we're moving in the right direction, certainly. It looks like Lola has joined us, so I will stop my share. And Lola, I'll let you speak, and let me make sure it's enabled for you. All right, give me just a second here to get set up. There we go. Okay, so we're going to get started today with this doozy of an exercise. And what we'll start with is actually working on the form. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Rhino. I haven't opened it yet, so I apologize that it's not pre-opened for us. And I'm going to choose the large object inches template, which is generally my default template. We'll organize V-Ray here a little bit. And then as I'm getting set up here, I'm going to go ahead and change the current renderer to be V-Ray. And because I know I'm going to need materials later on, I'm going to open the V-Ray asset editor. And I'm going to download all those materials. And we'll let that happen in the background. Okay, so our job first off is to start to create form or to play with form for this skyscraper. And We can do this in a variety of ways. We can use control curves and we can loft them together. We can actually use what's called a cage edit to warp or twist the building in some way. So I'm going to show you those methods, and I'm going to end up creating 5 or 6 different pieces just so you can see how they come together. So of course, our most simple building would be, a box, corner to corner. So if I started at 0, 0, the footprint that we're going to be working with is 100 feet by 200 feet. So I would say at 100 feet, 200 feet. We can zoom out a little bit. And then our overall building is going to be 600 feet tall. So I'll type 600 feet. And there's my building. Let's go ahead and switch this into shaded mode so we can kind of see it there. And that would be my first building. Now I could take this a step further, and I could start to manipulate the building before I even create it. Let's go over here 100 feet, and we'll create another building. Oops. Come on. There we go. At 100 feet, 200 feet. And so this time, instead of doing a box, I just did a line here. So let's say that maybe I'll clip this corner. So let me turn on my midpoint snap here, there, and we'll go to there. And then I'll use this as a trim. And maybe I'll trim that off. So I've clipped that corner of the building. Let's join that back together, join. And then maybe I'll raise this up. So let's copy it, vertical. I don't know, let's go up 300 feet. That would be halfway. There it is. Now maybe at this halfway point, I want this to go back to where it was before. So in that scenario, maybe I'll use a fillet with a radius of 0. And I'll reconnect that to that. Oops. It's going to make me explode it first. Sorry. We'll delete this. And then we'll do the fillet. There and there. Now it comes back to a corner. And maybe we'll copy this one all the way up to the top. Let's go copy V for vertical. And let's go up by 600 feet. There we go. Now, as I start to create this, right, I could take this and I could take this. Oops, let me join those together. I just typed in join there. I could take these two and I could loft them together. So if I type loft or went up to surface and then loft, it's going to ask me where the seam occurs. So I have to think carefully about where that seam occurs. So do I want this edge to correspond to that edge, for example? Or do I want it to correspond to this edge? It's going to change the look. I'm going to go right there. So that and that come together. We'll go ahead and hit enter, and we can look at it. So that gets a little bit twistier than I wanted to. So maybe I'll work through this in a little bit finer control. Let's go ahead and explode both of these. I want this and this to loft together. So I'll type loft. All right, that looks better. Then maybe I want the two back edges. Actually, we can work our way around the side, just leaving off there. Let's join, and then let's loft. And say okay. And that gives me the back sides. And then this little piece will fill in with a surface from 3 or 4 corner points. So 1, 2, and 3. And that gives us that first part of the building where I've clipped off the corner. And let's make this a little bit more interesting. Let's mirror this. And let's get rid of this one. And then let's do the same thing. So I'll take this and I'll explode it. Likewise, I'll take this and I'll explode it. And then let's look at this. So this point is going to correspond to there. This is that one. this is that one. Oops. And that one. Let's go ahead and join. And so now we should have, oops. I need to keep those separate. All right, so I'll take that, and we'll loft those. We'll take this and this. And we'll loft those. And then I need to do that last triangular piece. So maybe it's there, there, and there, and I'll hit enter. And now I have that as my skyscraper. So they're just different methods of working through this. Maybe I want to create one. So let's say at 100 feet, 200 feet. Let's move it over by 100 feet. Oops. There we go. And maybe I want to go from a rectangle into an ellipse. So let's say, oops. I'm going to have to use center snap here. So we'll snap to the center of, there it is. And there it is. And so we'll move this up, V for vertical. And let's say it's 600 feet. And I could take this shape, and I could loft those together. Notice that I'm really emphasizing the loft command. And I think that's important because as I loft these, the surfaces that I'm creating are what are called developable surfaces. Oh, looks like I made that building a little bit long. Let's take all of it. Let's scale 1D. That's under transform, scale 1D. And let's make sure that that is in fact 200 feet. There we go. So I'm starting to create these various forms in deciding what do I want my building to look like. And it could be some combination of the two. I could transform one into the other. But let's start thinking about these and then transforming them after we've created them. So let me use this one as my example. And this is part of the evolution here. Let me copy this so it's the next one in my series. So there's my next one. And before I do this, let's go ahead and give myself a top and a bottom. I'm going to do a rectangular plane to give myself a top there. And we'll do the same thing with a rectangular plane on the bottom, there and there. Then I need to do a little trimming. So we'll take this object, hold down Shift and that object, type trim or go to edit and then trim. And we'll get rid of that little piece there and that little piece there. So in this scenario, I have my building, which is very geometric thus far. Let's go ahead and join all of that together. So I have one enclosed polysurface. So I'll select it all, I'll type join, and up here it should say creating meshes. Now we have one closed polysurface. Now what I can do is I can start to modify what happens to this polysurface using what's called the cage edit tools. So it's available, you can type in cage edit, or you can go to transform and then choose cage editing down here, and we're going to perform a cage edit. It asks first to select control object. So we're going to use the bounding box. Most of the time you're going to want to use the bounding box. The coordinate system, we'll leave it set as world. Now we get to this cage parameters option here. And so here, this controls how many points we can work from in the X, Y, and Z direction as we start to modify our object. So for example, if in the X direction I put 2 points, in the Y direction I put 2 points, and in the Z direction I put 3 points, for example, what you're going to see when I get done is a set of control points, region to edit global, I hit enter, is a set of control points where I have those 4, I have 4 in the middle, and I have 4 up here at the top. Now, as I start to modify those, I can change what my building does. So let's take these 4 in the middle, and let's do a rotate. I'm going to snap to the center here, and I'm going to rotate by, say, well, you can see it as it kind of live rotates here. I'm going to rotate it by, I don't know, 10 degrees. So I'll type in 10. It's kind of a small rotation. Oh, let's make it more exaggerated than that. Let's go 30 so you can see it. So I rotate the cage in the middle, and it twists all of the surfaces as I create them. Right? Likewise, I could do the same thing with the top and the bottom. I could just move them. So I could take it, I could type move, and I could say move this back by 15 feet or 20 feet. So I could type in 20 feet, hold down shift to make sure I'm doing it on an angle, and it's going to shift that out of plumb by 20 feet. Maybe I needed to make that more substantial so you can see it. Let's move it by another 80 feet. And so now that whole tower is starting to lean. So let's go back to this first example and let's explore more options in the cage edit. So I'll bring this one over here. We'll go back up to cage editing on this. So I'll go to transform, cage editing, cage edit. We'll use a bounding box again. We'll use the world coordinates. And let's look at more options here. So you saw that when I had an X point count of 2, a Y point count of 2, and a Z point count of 3, I got points, 2 points in the X, 2 points in the Y, and 3 points, 3 groups of points in the Z. But up here, I also have something called degree 1, Y degree 1, and Z degree 2. Well, that's different. So what if we kept the point counts the same, 2, 2, 3, but we changed the degree to 1, 1, and 1? So I'll change that Z degree to 1. The rest of these options are fine. When I go to move, watch what happens in the middle. I'm going to do the same rotation. I'll type rotate. I'll snap to the center. Oh, there isn't a center here. Maybe I can snap to the center up above here. All right, and I rotated by 30 degrees. So I said 30, enter. Now notice this time, instead of having a smooth arc, when I change that degree level to 1, it's going to be a bend at the joint rather than a smooth arc. So the 3-dimensional curve, right, is allowing us to go beyond just 2-dimensional curvature. So the Y degree or the Z degree 3 is going to look very similar, but it's going to allow some more options. Let's explore that. So let me copy this. We'll come over here. And let's again do the cage edit. So we'll go to transform, cage editing, cage edit. And we'll do a bounding box, world. Okay, so let's up the number of points. So let's go 3 points, 3 points, and we'll keep the same 3 points for Z. And we're going to change the degrees to 3. For all of them. Then we'll press enter, one more enter, and now you see we have lots more points. That. Well, what happens in this scenario is that I can actually take a group of points, let's say these 4, and I can move them out to the side. And the result is that it takes the surface and it bulges that surface out. Furthermore, I could take these points and I could rotate them all. Let me turn on my point snap here. By 15 degrees. And so you can see that I'm starting to bulge and twist this building. So this is a bit of a trap, however. So while I can take this and we can get some exciting results out of it, the end result, because of the two-dimensional curvature, so if I look at any one point, all right, so let's look at this side. So I love the shape, it looks exciting, but this surface right here curves in two directions. It curves this way, but it also curves that way, kind of like the network surfaces that we've been creating. This surface is inherently difficult to build. So if we were to physically construct this, it would be difficult. It would be very custom, and each panel or each pane of glass would have to be its own individual curving shape that would then be assembled together. So it's not an easy thing to create. When we have surfaces that don't curve in two directions, but curve in only one direction, right? Essentially lofted surfaces, for example, this being a pretty good example, it's curving in this direction, but it's straight across. That is what's called a ruled surface, and that's something that we can build because at any one point across the curve, it's a straight segment. So we'll kind of cover this when we get back into the making unrollable surfaces. So for right now, you can feel free, you can work with some of these shapes that bulge. What I want you to do when you're done is identify your, quote, final building. So the one that you like. So let's say that I really like this building. That's the one that I like. Let's go ahead and move it into its own new file. I'm going to go to Edit, and I'll go to Copy. That's different than Transform Copy. This copy clip copies this building to the clipboard. I can then open another new Rhino file. We'll do a large object inches here. Let me close off the V-Ray toolbars. And I can drop this image in. I'll go to Edit and then Paste. So this is taking it from one Rhino file into another. And there it is. This I'm going to work with, but I want to move it right to the origin. So I'll take this corner right there and I'll move it to 0, 0, 0, making sure that it's exactly at the origin. That'll be beneficial when I use it as a block a little bit later on. We can also go ahead and view this in shaded mode so we can kind of see what's happening here. Okay, so there's my building. The next phase of this is that we need to start identifying, this is obviously the skin, but where are all the floors? We need to create those. So let's organize ourselves a bit. So let's rename the default layer to be skin. So I'll call that one skin. And actually, maybe we need a master layer called skyscraper. So let's say this is skyscraper. Let's put the skin layer as a sublayer of skyscraper. Now we need a floors layer. So I'll make that active. And I'm going to draw a rectangular surface. I can use the corner to corner, larger than my building. It's probably easiest to do it if we were looking down on my building. And we want to make sure that it's larger than my whole building. Not too big, but larger than my whole building. There it is. So this surface, because this building's 600 feet tall, the first floor is going to be up 24 feet. So floor to floor of 24 feet. So I'm going to copy it. I'll go to Transform and then Copy, or I could type Copy. It's going to be a vertical copy, and we'll go up by 24 feet. There's my first floor. Now the next floor after that, I need to go up what is it? Is it only 12 feet? Let me look. I do have it written out here so you can reference it. Let me, come on, finish. Let me look right here. The rest of the 36 stories are going to be 16 feet each, 24 for the lobby. So from here up, I need to go up 16 feet. So I could copy it again, V for vertical, and I could go from here up to 16 feet. And then the next one, I could go to 32 or etc. But that's a lot of work, and it's a lot of math to figure out each one or to copy each one. So what I can do instead is I can actually do an array. So I can type in array, A-R-R-A-Y. I'll hit enter. Select objects in the array. There's my floor. I'll hit enter. Number in the X direction, 1. Number in the Y direction, 1. Number in the Z direction. Remember, I said there were going to be 36 floors, so we'll type 36. Enter. Then it asks for the spacing or first reference point. So we know that's 16 feet, so I could just type in 16 feet. Or, so you could visually see it, I can click right there and choose what the distance is. So if I type in 16 feet, going up, there are all of my floors. It's going to ask me enter to accept, or it lets me change either the spacing or the number. So if I wasn't correct in my numbers, I could add one more number. I am correct, so we're okay. I'll go ahead and hit enter, and that gives me all of my floors. So these floors are obviously much larger than the building itself, so we need to trim these floors. So I'll take the building, the skin of the building. Yeah, Brianna, you're asking a great question. Should we imagine the base of the building cannot extend outside of the 100 by 200 foot rectangular site? Yes, let's keep the base of the building at 100 by 200, but while there are actual physical requirements about not leaning into somebody else's space, I'm okay if you lean or twist above that base. Keep the base at 100 by 200. Everything else can twist or lean however you want it to be. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this. So I've selected my skin, and then I'll go ahead and type in trim, or go up to edit and then trim. And while it's tempting to just do a big rectangle and trim them all at once, sometimes that crashes. So I like to do smaller groups. So I'll trim a few at once. I didn't trim the last one because there actually already is a base. So we'll go ahead and hit enter. And you can see that I have, if I were to turn off the skin layer, I have all of those floors, and they've been trimmed to fit inside of the skin. So that's good. So next up, though, we need our ceilings on each of these floors. So we'll type in ceilings. We'll make it active. Let's change this into our ceilings. So let's right click, change object layer. And your logical question is, why is that different than the floor? Well, there's usually some space in between the ceiling of one floor and the floor of the other, of the floor above. And that space is for structure, but it's also for things like the air conditioning and the ductwork and the plumbing and whatever. So we're going to leave 4 feet between each of those floors. So we knew that our first one was up 24 feet. So we'll go up 20 feet to start. So let me just go ahead and move this rectangle vertical by 20 feet. And there it is. So we can see that it's 4 feet apart. And then we can do that same array. So I'll type in array. Number in the X direction is 1. Number in the Y direction is also 1. Number in the Z direction is again 36. We'll hit enter. And my spacing is going to be 16 feet again. So even though the space between the floor and the ceiling is only 12 feet, this is going to repeat at 16 feet going up. We'll make sure that everything looks okay, and then we'll go ahead and press enter. And that gives us all of our ceilings. If I were to turn back on the skin, now we have our ceilings and our floors. So once again, I need to do my trim. So I'll select the poly surface. We'll go ahead and type trim. And we'll do some small groups here. And there it is. So I have my floor and I have my ceiling. Let's go ahead and save this file. I'll go to File and then Save. And let me put it into today's folder here. Call it Building of Spring of 2022. Click Save. Now, the last thing that you could add is you could also add an elevator core. And I'd say this is about 30 feet by 30 feet. I like to look down on my building when I do this because you need a spot that is completely contained within the building. If it twists and bulges and whatever, we have to make sure that it's in this middle section here. So let's say that this is 30 by 30. So I'll say at 30 feet, comma 30 feet. And then I need it to be up taller than the building. And it usually is a full story taller, so maybe more. So let's say that was supposed to be 600 feet. Let's go 612 feet. And there's that little elevator core popping up out of the building. So we could then actually trim and cut that all the way down inside of the building, cut all of those floors out. It's not really necessary to cut it out, but you could. So let me see how much time I have. Yeah, I'm a little short on time, so I'm going to leave it like that. But let's put that on its own layer. So that would go on layer 4 here. Let me right-click, change object layer. And this is now going to be core. Layer 5 is nothing. We'll go ahead and delete it. And now we have our building with our materials, or sorry, without our materials yet, but with our floors and our ceilings. So it's time to do some basic materials on these. We open up V-Ray. Let's go over here into concrete. I'm going to do, that was bricks. How about concrete? There we go. Concrete ceiling. Let's add to scene. Then I'll right click on it and say apply to layer ceilings. Actually, let's apply to the floor. Apply to layer floors. And let's do the ceilings white instead. Let's see here. There it is. Wall paint and wallpaper. I knew it was there somewhere. Let's use wall paint fine grain white. Right click, add to scene. Right click, apply to layer, ceilings. Okay, so that's good. So I've got 2 materials applied there. I probably should use concrete for the core. So let's go back to concrete. Let's use this one, actually. Let's add to scene. Let's right click, apply to layer. And this is going to go on the core. Oops. Apply to layer core. So the last piece of this, in order to render it well, is to have some kind of glass on the outside. And this is a really tricky one. We could certainly apply and use real glass, but I found that it doesn't work as well. So I actually created a couple files for you. It's a skyscraper glass, dark and light. Either one of those, if you download those, it looks like it's a zip file. Let me save the link as. It will contain the pieces that you need to be able to render this out. I already have them on my flash drive, so I'm going to skip ahead. Let me go to my V-Ray asset editor. Let's go ahead and load the asset. So I'll click on the open box here. Let me go into my flash drive. Let me go into my resources. It's going to be in V-Ray, V-Ray materials, glass. And there's my skyscraper. I'll use skyscraper light, and then we can go ahead and open that. And then I'll right click on it and say apply to layer, and we'll put it on the skin layer. Perfect. These floor, ceilings, and core should all be sublayers of the skyscraper layer. There we go. Now everything looks fairly well organized. So we'll go ahead and save this file. So I have the materials on. I'm not doing the texture mapping. We'll spend some time doing the texture mapping next class and kind of fine tuning it because I know I'm running short on time. So the next piece that I need to do this is I need to go ahead and download the SF Downtown model. This is hosted by Dropbox. So if you click on it, it'll take you to Dropbox. There it is. You can click on download. If it asks you to sign up, you can just close the box and then you can download and it will download. I already have it downloaded, so I'm going to go ahead and open it. And this is a very beefy file, so it may take a little bit to open. Let's close all of my toolbars here. There we are, we'll dock it. And so if I were to zoom back here and zoom out, we can see that this mesh is representative of at least part of San Francisco. You can see the Embarcadero, for example. Okay, I've selected a site for you. I have a nice little pad that's there for you that is 100 feet by 200 feet. How convenient. Right? It's listed here under building site. If this file gets heavy and difficult to work with, sometimes it's easiest just to turn off the model. And then you can see just your pad for the building. So let me go ahead and save this onto my OneDrive. So I'll go to File and then Save As. And let's get it onto my OneDrive so if things crash, I won't lose it. And there it is. And actually, let's add a spring of 2022. And I should never say, well, I'll save it really quick, because whenever I say that, this always fails on me. There we go. And now I'm going to bring in as a block. So I'll go to Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. We've done this before, but I want to bring it in as a block, which means it's referencing that other file, which lets me go back and make changes to it, change materials, change geometry, etc. So let's go ahead and find that building file. That's the downtown. There's my building. We'll click open. There it is. And I'm going to link it with a reference layer style. And we'll go ahead and say okay. The rest of this is all okay. We'll say okay. And then I get my building. Now it doesn't quite line up with my building site just yet. So I'm going to have to make some modifications. So I'm going to, let's see, I'll snap right to that corner. We can kind of see the building. And then I need to rotate this building around. So I'll type rotate. And I will use this side here as a reference. And I'll rotate it around until it lines up with that base right there. So there's my building. And it's now officially on the site. If I were to turn back on the downtown model, we'd see that there's my building in the context of all the rest of the buildings of San Francisco. Okay, so at this point, we need to start establishing this for a rendering. So this currently doesn't have a sun. It actually doesn't have any lighting at all, and it doesn't have any kind of a sky. So if I were to render it, it would turn out with kind of a black sky. So we have to do two things to create this. The first thing that we have to do is to create a sun. And thus far in the class, we've only ever used the directional light tool, this tool. But we want to move on into something more specific in that we want to create an actual sun in the scene. So if I were to click on this sun creation tool, it's going to bring up the sun angle calculator and let me actually calculate what the sun angle would be. So let's come down here into search and type in San Francisco. So we have an actual location. There's the actual location. It gives us a latitude and a longitude. It gives us a time zone. And then we can come up here and we can choose a day of the year. And we can choose a time of day. So we can go early in the morning or late in the afternoon. So let's move it to a little bit earlier in the morning. Notice we also have the ability to turn on daylight savings time. Well, we're in daylight savings time, so I should probably turn it on. So once I have that, I can go ahead and say, okay. And this is where people make a mistake, is that they don't actually insert the sun into the scene. So you have to push enter one more time, and that'll show up at 0, 0. Or sometimes it's easiest just to snap it to a known place on your building. So I'll snap it right there on the corner of my building, and there's my sun. We could also take it a step further. We could create a layer for sun, or better yet, a layer for environment, and then a sublayer for sun. Let me take the sun, which looks an awful lot like a directional light. It happens to be just a more powerful directional light. Let's change the object layer. Now it's on the sun layer, and we're getting close on the rendering. So we have a sun. The next piece of this is that we need a sky. And the sky is available in the V-Ray asset editor. So I'll click on the V-Ray asset editor here. And we need to actually install a sky into the scene. So let's go ahead and let's look. Hold on, I want to make sure I'm in the right spot. Let's go to our settings. Let's open the drawer to the right. And let's look under global illumination. Nope, that's not right. Sorry, bear with me for a second. This is one of those moments where they move things around. Sorry, you got to give me a second here. Those are the rendering elements. Environment textures. Where'd it go? Ah, environment. You would think that I could remember that. Okay, so I apologize. So you're going to come up here into the V-Ray asset editor, click on the settings, and then come down here to the environment section. Of course, I was looking for something called sky. It's called environment. And we're going to work here with the background. And so currently there is a background. See that checkerboard is blue? That means there's already a background installed. We want to get rid of the background that comes in by default. So we will right click on it and say clear. So we right click on it and say clear. Then we can click on the background. And we have the ability to choose sky out of it. So we'll choose sky. Now we have an environment sky. And if we look at it here, if we expand it over to the right, we can see that it's choosing our sun. It says sunlight. We don't want the Rhino document sun. We want the actual sunlight. That is the sun that's working with our sky. So we make sure those two are tied together, which they are. The rest of these options are just fine. So once we have that, it's time to actually perform a rendering. I have two views pre-saved for you. So if we go to set view, I have perspective 1 and 2. These are both street level perspectives that let you look towards your building. So there's perspective 1. If I want to set view, there's perspective 2, both of which give you a view of your building. Neither of these, however, show too much of the sky. This one shows a little bit of the sky. So we could use this as our precursor. Next class, I'll show you how to modify the overall rendering so you get more of your building out of it by changing the view. But for right now, let's just do this perspective 2. I'll go ahead and click on the teapot icon right here, and that'll start my render. Or it should. We have to give it a little bit of time to get started here. All right, well, I'm going to let it go, but I know that I'm a few minutes over time. So if you need to go, you're free to go right now, but I will let this kind of finish out. I want to confirm that the sky is showing up in the upper right corner. I may need to adjust the exposure value, which you guys have done before, to get good results. So we'll let this keep rendering because I want to confirm that it worked out. But if you find that your building is too light or too dark, we'll change it in the exposure value. This will build next class. We'll spend some more time with the environment. We'll spend some more time in V-Ray. So you'll definitely get some more practice with it. Let's see here. I think we're just getting reflection of buildings right now. Let me stop this. And I'm going to go back into my V-Ray, and in my settings here, I'm going to, under my render output, I want to get the match viewport. That way I know I have the sky here. And let's try that render again. This is one of the challenges with rendering. It always is the waiting process while you check it. So for those of you that are coming into my first session, just stick around. Everybody else, you are welcome to leave, or you can also stick around until I finish this. My first session at 12:10 may start a little bit late because I want to make sure that I get through this first.
I'll see you at 12:40.
You bet.
Thank you.
No problem. Yes, Brianna, good question. For 202, yes, the work that you did in 212 and 213 is the work that you're submitting. So you're going to give me the AutoCAD file and the screenshot showing the red and blue lines, and that's it. So if we were in person, I would make you actually build the model, but in remote, you don't have access to a laser cutter, so you won't have to do it. So you're just going to show me those two things, and then we'll move on into this assignment where we're going to do renderings and 3D models, which you'll see soon. I'm going to post it next class. Good question, though. Okay, so I can see now that the sky is showing. I'm getting the sky out of it. Looks like my rendering still takes some time with the glass and maybe having some issues. The brownish color of the site is a little bit less than ideal, so I may need to modify. I was supposed to use a white porcelain. I'm not super happy with it. This would be certainly satisfactory for today. I think next class I'll spend a little bit more time refining this and getting better rendering results out. But I wanted to confirm that the sky was working and that I am getting sun and shadows being cast, etc. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then we'll get into our session in another 4 minutes.